When we do that, when we don't do that, I miss that. It's like, get my 7 kinds of mischief on. Greetings, everybody, and welcome to 7 Kinds of Mischief. I'm your host, Stone Loki, and of course, we have the one, the only, the Mad Doctor of Valhalla, author, Adega Outlaw. How are you doing, brother?
I'm the other guy. I'm doing pretty good. Sorry about last week, everyone. I was not feeling well. Usually that's the case when we don't have a Thursday, and Loki covers for me by saying I got things to do, but usually it's other things. But I had a couple things, if you don't mind me taking a minute. First off, the thumbnail on Twitter that Chris did, I dig that. That reminds me of a white coat story I'll have to tell you guys sometime from college. But I like that. The other thing is a couple more things coming up in chat. Go ahead and say hi to everybody first. I'm sorry. I'm just jumping in and being nosy and bad and horrible.
No. This is great. Real quick, welcome Psychodorp 9, Andrew 46 and 2. Dave Bob says Stone Cold Loki.
Dave Bob.
Thank you, Dave Bob. The Rooster Dave Bob, who will be on tomorrow morning with us, with me and the lady, Arwen Avalon. Good morning, Dave Bob. Project Cambrian is here. Pat S is here. I saw Lady Mist earlier. There she is. The one and only Lady Mist. Good evening to the Lady Mist. I saw you pop in to the morning show, and I was like, holy shit, I missed her. Son of a bitch!
Queen of digital confetti.
Claude Saline, good evening, Claude. Good evening, everybody in here. Chris Purge of the Wrench of Wrenches, Leia Rose, Brandon Looney Tunes fan 2000, Monkey Jeebus says, hey guys. Good evening, Brian Dawes says, hey all, stopping in before my nightly dose of madness with Tim Pool. Absolutely, thank you, my friend, very much. DJ Ronnie G is here. Adega, Mim, Loki, Adega.
Yeah! There you go.
That's what I'm talking about. That is what I'm
talking
about.
had mentioned something about my icon. He really liked it. Well, you know what this icon is? Some of you know. I had this girl that worked in our office, young lady, and her father had passed away when she was younger. And so I kind of tried to say that I was her adopted dad. And one day I took an x-ray of her hand, but we were monkeying with the x-ray, so it came out really underexposed. That's an underexposed x-ray of her hand stretched out on a pane of glass. And then I took a picture of that, and I kept it because I thought it was cool. So that's what that is. It's my wannabe adopted adult child.
All right. Give me 1 second. I'm working on getting something up here because I want to show this off. Because Dega mentioned it, and I'm like, okay, we gotta show this off. All right. So I didn't have time tonight to change the thumbnail, but boom, there it is. Look at the goggles. Look at the goggles.
Like that is cool. You did it, Chris. I like that one. I like the other suit too. This one's good. Now, toot my own horn. When you're in school, and I may have mentioned this before, you get to a point where you start working on people instead of working on students. They trust you. They'll have doctors there to make sure you're doing everything right, and you're supposed to wear a coat the whole time, white jacket. And 2 things happened. One, this one girl kept stealing my jacket all the time. I had no idea. I lost 2 or 3 of them. I finally decided to mark it so I would know. And it was actually a friend of mine. She kept taking my jacket. And so I gave her a hard time because those things were $50 a pop. And I was tired of buying new ones. And she denied it, but the little mark was on there. So I took my jacket back. The other thing was I had a couple of experiences, and you may know some of them, where things were really dicey and when working with patients, and I had some phenomenal results. Well, the last straw came, and this guy came in with his significant other. I can't remember if they were married or not, but I was doing an exam on him, and something that is a medical emergency. Remember, I said medical. There was no bowel sounds when I was doing the exam. You couldn't hear his gut at all, which meant something was rotting in there and he could die real quick.
Mm.
So the staff doctor, I had told her, it was an older lady, she's brilliant, but I told her, I said, this guy doesn't have any bowel sounds. She came and checked it out. She says, all right, I'm calling the ambulance. And I said, wait a second. She looked at me and I says, let me do my thing. And she goes, you got 5 minutes. I took care of the guy, and within 5 minutes, his bowel sounds were working. He felt like $1,000,000. She looked at me and says, I don't believe it. After that day, I was the only student ever that didn't have to wear a lab coat to the clinic.
Crazy. That is
So yeah,
crazy.
it was fun. It was fun. So again, I'm tooting my own horn.
Well, you have a reason to.
Oh, I loved being a doc. I loved it. I loved every bit of it. But you know what? You gotta love everything you do. So I like writing, I like playing music, I like hanging out with you, I like hanging out with all the good people of Valhalla. Life is good. As much as stuff we see around us, you gotta, like we were doing beforehand, you just gotta laugh at it. Stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. Sometimes you just got to laugh at it all.
Right? Well, I do have. If I remember how I numbered these, this would probably be the second kind of mischief. Last time I was here, I did the seventh kind, which is the good stuff, where you get inspirational, think wonderful things about humans. This one happens to deal with a couple of things combined on the more cryptid or alien or what have you. It's kind of combined. Some of you guys will know um, how this works. I'm gonna read this article. And when I found out about this, I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. I'm going to share it with everybody. Um, a lot of you probably have heard of the Mothman. So I'm going to just kind of touch that a little bit, but it's going to tie into something else who I thought was really weird. And this one you may also know as well. Either way, I'm going to cover it for those of you who don't. All right, here we go. If there's an alien flying a UFO, a sinister creature lurking in West Virginia countryside, or a grinning man in black espousing prophecies, then it must be Indrid Cold. The legend of Indrid Cold is unique. Within modern lore, no man or thing has been connected to other legends as he has been. From the Mothman prophecies to Men in Black UFO conspiracies, his name has surfaced as a likely source for two. With so many sources, it's hard to tell who or what Indrid is. We're going to get into some of those sources. And there's a lot of different information, so I'm going to read some of it and then I'm going to embellish by putting in other bits to expand the story. Indrid's origins appear to come from West Virginia. This particular portion of the legend is a fact. The record first account of him was made by John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies. The Mothman is a winged creature that was purported to show up in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, near the Ohio border just before a catastrophe was about to happen. Keel was an investigative reporter of paranormal claims who came to the region to research the Mothman. According to Keel, he received a mysterious phone call. The caller, who identified himself as Indrid Cold, gave him a cryptid and supposedly prophetic message. Further investigation by Keel revealed that many people who saw the Mothman also saw a person they nicknamed the Grinning Man, or Man in Black. Some of these eyewitnesses claim that Indrid Cold and the Mothman were one and the same. Possibly the most infamous of all the Mothman sightings occurred in January 11th, 1967. The cryptid was spotted hovering above the Silver Bridge, a I-bar chain suspension bridge which connected Point Pleasant with Galapagos, Ohio, on the opposing side of the Ohio River. On December 16th, 1967, the bridge collapsed, killing 46 people. Since that incident, the Mothman has been seen as a prophet of doom. With the accounts of Indrid Cold's cryptic phone call, he too was given the same title. Later, Keel would get a better description of Indrid after his interview to two New Jersey teenagers who claimed to have seen a tall man with a big old grin. Kind of makes me think of Slender Man, but not. I'll read you their story in just a sec, but to give you a background that doesn't get into this, they had been out, these two boys, they were on their way home. It's late at night, and they saw someone staring at a house. The description of the size varies, not with them, but some of them say this individual's 7 feet tall, but these guys don't. So with that, they see someone staring. They described him as having no hair, ears, or nose. He had beady eyes and a big grin, and he wore a green suit that shimmered under the streetlight. The Mothman, or Indrid Cold, legend persisted for years. Eventually, Keel would release his book, turning the local folklore into national legend. This connection between the two would become a pivotal part of the movie adaptation of Keel's book, and I haven't seen the movie, maybe you have. However, there are those unconvinced of Keel's claims. There are claims that Indrid Cole, his real origin, was from another West Virginia town, according to a writer on a blog from a group called the Weird Tales Paranormal Investigation Organization. The Indrid Cole story happened in a town called Parksburg. The writer, who evidently is of that town, states that Indrid was a strange man that came out of nowhere. I think he was an alien, this is in quotes, man in black, but he wasn't at Point Pleasant, he wrote, because he seemed nicer than the other one that was described at Point Pleasant. According to the blog, Indrid Cole arrived in town in 1966, which is a year earlier, about the same year when the Mothman was being reported at Point Pleasant. To support his claims, the writer included a lengthy taped interview with a witness from 1966. And actually, you can find that interview on YouTube, I believe. The person, salesman Woody or Woodrow Wernberger, that's it, stated in the interview that he came across Indrid Cole while traveling on Interstate 77. He claimed to see a car being chased by an unidentified flying object. The car sped off. However, the UFO swerved and stopped in front of Durenberger's truck, forcing him to slam on the brakes. After it landed, Durenberger stated that the man left the object and approached his car. He was described as 6 feet tall, 185 pounds, between 30 to 40 years in age, and wearing a suit similar to the typical Men in Black appearance. He was also grinning from ear to ear. He told me to roll down the window. He actually told me to roll down the window on the right side of the truck, he said. The stranger, who would later identify himself as Indrid Cole, told Durenberger not to be frightened and that he wouldn't mean any harm. The meaning of we wouldn't mean any harm. The meaning of we was never fully explained. In another blog, the writer claimed that Durenberger and Indrid communicated telepathically for 5 to 10 minutes. The topic of their conversation was less than earth-shattering. It seemed that Indrid wanted to know what the distant lights were. That's where the original story in his interview is different. It says what the distant lights were. Durenberger said he wanted to know what town those distant lights were called. He needed to know the name of the town. Durenberger stated that the lights were Parksburg. Much of the interview was convoluted. The reporter asked at one point if Durenberger was a drinker and intoxicated. Durenberger claimed that the conversation that he was told that Indrid would communicate with him in the future. Indrid immediately boarded his saucer and took off. Apparently, it didn't look like a saucer. Some of the descriptions, there's a drawing out there somewhere, but kind of like a lantern. The end result of this strange tale had an effect on the legend of Indrid Cole. Instead of being a part of a Mothman legend, he who is now associated with UFO lore. Perhaps the two subjects are related. As the 1960s ended, the legend of Indrid cooled. However, he wasn't forgotten. In the new millennium, several blogs and websites were created in his honor. Websites such as unexplainablenet.net were reported that Indrid had returned from outer space. On January 20th, 2011, Chris Capps wrote an entry in his blog, "Has Indrid Cold returned?" The Grinning Man. There are also reports, this is pretty much where this article ends, but there are reports of, like I said, the boys, when they came up to the house where the guy was grinning, he turned and grinned and looked at them, and they ran for the hills, were able to get away. There was another story of, and some say it's related and some say it doesn't. And the only reason why it's related is because of the description. One was shiny green clothes, think of metallic suit. There was another one where it was a blue metallic suit looking identical, just different color. And then there was this little girl who screamed for her parents in the night. They didn't come, but she related a story not knowing about this grinning man. And she told them the next day, there was a guy in her room and he was at the foot of the bed grinning at me. He was very, very large and didn't do anything other than just grin and stare. Then he moved to the side of the bed. When she got scared, she covered her head. And a few moments later, she looked and he was gone. So now you know a little bit more about the potential ties in with Mothman, UFOs, and the Grinning Man of West Virginia. Nope.
Oops. Wrong button. No one saw that. Thank you. Thank
That
you,
was a cryptid.
Adega. That was cryptid?
That was a cryptid.
Yeah. We'll go back and remove that. Oh my God, I doxed myself. Oh no. So we're gonna start something. Lady Miss saw it, Lisa saw it. We're gonna start reading something here, and this might take a couple weeks to get through. We'll see how long it takes to get through this. But I've been looking forward to this. So what we're gonna do, where we're gonna start this week, is I'm gonna read about the spirit of evil. Do you know what I'm gonna be talking about, Adega? The spirit of evil?
That relates to several different things, so I'm not sure.
All right. Well, we'll just kick it off here because I'm so horrible. Hashtag blame Loki.
There you go.
Besides the hideous giant Utgard Loki, the personification of mischief and evil, whom Thor and his companions visited in Jotunheim, the ancient northern nations had another type of evil, whom they called Loki also, and whom we have already seen under many different circumstances. In the beginning, Loki was merely the personification of hearth, fire, and the spirit of life. At first a god, he gradually becomes god and devil combined, and ends in being held in general detestation and counterpart of medieval Lucifer, the prince of lies, the originator of deceit and the backbiter of the Aesir. By some authorities, Loki was said to be the brother of Odin, but others assert that the two were not related at all, but had merely gone through the form of swearing blood brotherhood, common in the north, meaning that he was not an Aesir and he came from another pantheon. Odin, dost thou remember when we in early days blended blood together, when to taste beer thou did not constantly refuse, unless to both was offered. That is from the Edda. While Thor is the embodiment of northern activity, Loki represents recreation, And the close companionship early established between these two gods shows very plainly how soon our ancestors realized that both were necessary to the welfare of mankind. Thor is ever busy and ever earnest in his activities, but Loki makes fun of everything until at last his love of mischief leads him entirely astray, and he loses all love for goodness and becomes utterly selfish and malevolent. He represents evil in the seductive and seemingly beautiful form in which it parades through the world. Because of this deceptive appearance, the gods did not first avoid him, but trusted him as one of their own in all good fellowship, taking him with them wherever they went and admitting him not only to their merrymakings, but also to their council hall, where unfortunately they too often listened to his advice. Hashtag blame Loki. As we have already seen, Loki played a prominent part in the creation of man, endowing him with the power of motion and causing the blood to circulate freely through man's veins, whereby he was inspired with passions. As personification of fire as well as mischief, Loki, lightning, is often seen with Thor, thunder, whom he accompanies to Jotunheim to recover his hammer, to Utgard Loki's castle, and to Gerad's house. It is he who steals Freya's necklace and Sif's hair and betrays Idun to the power of Thesai. And although he sometimes gives the gods good advice and affords them real help, it is only to extricate them from a predicament into which he has rashly envisioned them. Some authorities declare that instead of making part of the creative trilogy, Odin, Honor, and Lodor, or Loki, this god originally belonged to a pre-Odinic race of deities, hence another pantheon, and was the son of the great giant Fortner, Ymir, his brother being Kari, air, and Hlair, water, and his sister Ran, the terrible goddess of the sea. Other mythologists, however, make him the son of the giant Farbutni, who was identified with Beglamir, the sole survivor of the deluge or flood, and of Laufey, Leafy Isle or Null, vessel, his mother, thus stating that his connection with Odin was only that of the northern oath of good fellowship. No one knows where the hell he comes from, and everyone makes guesses. Loki, who is fire, first married Glut, who bore him two daughters, Isa, embers, and Enmir, ashes. It is therefore very evident that Norsemen considered him of the hearth fire. And when the flaming wood crackles on the hearth, the good wives of the north are still wont to say that Loki is beating his children. Besides this wife, Loki is also said to have wedded the giantess Angerboda, the anguish boding, who dwelt in Jotunheim and who, as we have already seen, bore him three monsters: Hel, the goddess of death, the Midgar snake, Wormgundur, and the grim wolf, Fenris. Loki's third marriage was with Sigyn, who proved a most loving and devoted wife, and bore him two sons, Narvi and Vali, the latter a namesake of the god who avenged Balder. Sigyn was always faithful to her husband and did not forsake him even after he had definitely been cast out of Asgard and confined to the bowels of the earth. As Loki was the embodiment of evil in the minds of the northern races, they entertained nothing but fear of him, built no temples to his honor, offered no sacrifices to him, and designated the most noxious weeds by his name. The quivering, overheated atmosphere of summer was supposed to be bestoken his presence, for the people were then wont to remark that Loki was sowing his wild oats, and when the sun appeared to be drawing water, they said Loki was drinking. The story of Loki is so inexorably woven that the other gods, most of the myths relating to him, have already been told, and there remain but two episodes of his life to relate. one showing his bitter side before he had degenerated into the arch deceiver, and the other illustrating how he finally induced the gods to defile their peace steads by willful murder. So this is the story of Skirmsley and the Peasant's Child.
Now the fire makes sense.
He was sowing his wild oats. He was getting it on. Let's get it on. I've been feeling fine.
That's where Mike
baby.
learned it from.
It's been so long. Look at that. Look at Adega. There we go with the shades, my man. That's what I'm talking about.
The big
Giant.
Those aren't my favorite ones. Let me grab my favorite one. You can almost use them as welding glasses. It'll take just a sec. Go ahead.
No, I'm waiting. We got to see this.
Well, they're nicely wrapped in a leather pouch. I keep them as pristine as I can. They're handmade, but they are very dark.
Hashtag Loki did it. There you go. There you go. That's what I'm talking
Love
about.
Those.
The round ones suit you too.
You know what? Sunglasses were made for my face.
So this story is called Skirmsley and the Peasant's Child. A giant and a peasant were playing a game together one day, probably a game of chess, which was a favorite winter pastime with the Northern Vikings. They, of course, had determined to play for certain stakes, and the giant, being victorious, won the peasant's only son, whom he said he would come and claim on the morrow unless the parents could hide him so cleverly that he could not be found. Knowing that such a feat would be impossible for them to perform, the parents fervently prayed to Odin to help them. And in answer to their entreaties, the god came down to earth and changed the boy into a tiny grain of wheat, which he hid in an ear of grain in the midst of a large field, declaring that the giant would not be able to find him. The giant Skirmsley, however, possessed wisdom far beyond what Odin imagined, and, failing to find the child at home, strode off immediately to the field with his scythe. And mowing the wheat, he selected the particular ear where the boy was hidden. Counting over the grains of wheat, he was about to lay his hands upon the right one when Odin, hearing the child's cry of distress, snatched the kernel out of the giant's hand and restored the boy to his parents, telling them that he had done all in his power to help them. But as the giant vowed, he had been cheated and would again claim the boy on the morrow unless the parents could outwit him. The unfortunate parents now turned to Honor for aid. The god heard them graciously and changed the boy into a fluff of down, which he hid in the breast of a swan swimming in a pond close by. Now when, a few minutes later, Skirmsley came up, he guessed what had occurred and seized the swan. He bit off its neck and would have swallowed the down had not Honir wafted it away from his lips and out of his reach, restoring the boy safe and sound to his parents, but telling them that he could no further aid them. Skirmsley warned the parents that he would make a third attempt to secure the child, whereupon they applied in their despair to Loki, who carried the boy out to sea and concealed him as a tiny egg in the roe of a flounder. Returning from his expedition, Loki encountered the giant near the shore and, seeing that he was bent upon a fishing excursion, insisted upon accompanying him. He felt somewhat uneasy lest the terrible giant should have seen through his device, and therefore thought it would be well for him to be on the spot in case of need. Skirmsley baited his hook and was more or less successful in his angling, when suddenly he drew up the identical flounder in which Loki had concealed his little charge. Opening the fish upon his knee, the giant proceeded to minutely examine the roe until he found the egg which he was seeking. The plight of the boy was certainly perilous, but Loki, watching for his chance, snatched the egg out of the giant's grasp and, transforming it again into the child, he instructed him to secretly run home, passing through the boathouse on his way and closing the door behind him. Terrified boy did as he was told immediately and found himself on land, and the giant, quick to observe his flight, dashed after him into the boathouse. Now Loki had cunningly placed a sharp spike in such a position that the great head of the giant ran full tilt against it, and he sank to the ground with a groan. Whereupon Loki, seeing him helpless, cut off one of his legs. Imagine the god's dismay, however, when he saw the pieces join and immediately knit back together. Loki was a master of guile and recognized this as the work of magic. He cut off the other leg, promptly throwing flint and steel between the severed limb and trunk, and thereby hindering any further sorcery. The peasants were immediately relieved to find that their enemy was slain, and ever after they considered Loki the mightiest of all the heavenly council, for he had delivered them effectively from their foe, while the other gods had lent only temporary aid.
Loki did do it.
Loki did do it. And we'll do one more.
Something nice.
Yes. We'll do one more. I don't know. There's a couple of chapters here. So. This is called The Great Architect. Notwithstanding their wonderful bridge Bifrost, the tremulous way, and the watchfulness of Heimdall, the gods could not feel entirely secure in Asgard, and were often fearful lest the frost giants should make their way into Asgard. To obviate this possibility, they finally decided to build an impregnable fortress. And while they were planning how this could be done, an unknown architect came with an offer to undertake the construction, provided the gods would give him sun, moon, and Freya, goddess of youth and beauty, as reward. The gods were wroth at the so presumptuous an offer. But when they would have indignantly driven the stranger from their presence, Loki urged them to make a bargain, which it would be impossible for the stranger to keep. And so they finally told the architect that the guerdon should be his, provided the fortress were finished in the course of a single winter, and that he accomplished the work with no other assistance than that of his horse, Spaldafair. Some of you know this story. To Asgard came an architect, and castle offered to erect, a castle high, which should defy deep Jotun, guile, and giant raid, and this most wily compact made, fair Freya with the moon and sun as price the fortress for being done. The unknown architect agreed to these seemingly impossible conditions and immediately set to work. Hauling ponderous blocks of stone by night, building during the day, and progressing so rapidly that the gods began to feel somewhat anxious. Ere long, they noticed that more than half the labor was accomplished by the wonderful steed Spaldafair, and when they saw near the end of winter that the work was finished, save only one portal, which they knew the architect could easily erect during the night. Terrified lest they should be called upon to part, not only with the sun and the moon, but also with Freya, the personification of youth and beauty of the world, the gods turned upon Loki and threatened to kill him unless he devised some means of hindering the architect from finishing the work within the specified time. Loki's cunning proved once more equal to the situation. He waited until nightfall of the final day, when as Spaldafair passed the fringe of a forest, painfully dragging one of the great blocks of stone required for the termination of the work, he rushed out from a dark glade in the guise of a mare, and neighed so invitingly that in a trice the horse kicked himself free of his harness and ran after the mare, closely pursued by his angry master. The mare galloped swiftly on, artfully luring horse and master deeper and deeper into the forest, until the night was nearly gone, and it was no longer possible to finish the work. The architect was none other than redoubtable Hrimthurs in disguise, and he now returned to Asgard in a towering rage at the fraud which had been practiced upon him. Assuming his wonted proportions, He would have annihilated the gods had not Thor immediately returned from a journey and slain him with his magic hammer Mjolnir, which he hurled with terrific force full to the face. The gods had saved themselves on this occasion only by fraud and the violent deed of Thor, and they were destined to bring great sorrow upon them, and eventually to secure their downfall and to hasten the coming of Ragnarok. Loki, however, felt no remorse for his part, and in due time, it is said, he became the parent of an 8-footed steed called Sleipnir, which, as we have seen, was Odin's favorite horse. Loki performed so many evil deeds during his career that he richly deserved the title of Arch Deceiver, which was given him. He was generally hated for his subtle, malicious ways and for a nibbed habit of provocation, which won for him also the title of Prince of Lies. Loki's last crime, and the one which filled his measure of iniquity, was to induce Hodor to throw the fatal mistletoe at Balder, whom he hated merely on account of his immaculate purity. Perhaps even this crime might have been condoned had it not been for his, when, in the disguise of the old woman Thok, he was called upon to shed a tear for Balder. His actions on this occasion convinced the gods that nothing but evil remained within Loki, and they pronounced unanimously upon him the sentence of perpetual banishment from Asgard. To divert the gods' sadness and make them for a short time forget the treachery of Loki and the loss of Balder, Aegir, god of the sea, invited them to partake in a banquet in his coral caves at the bottom of the sea. The gods gladly accepted the invitation, and clad in their richest garb and with festive smiles, they appeared in the coral caves at the appointed time. None were absent save the radiant Balder, for whom many a regretful sigh was heaved, and the evil Loki, whom none could regret. In the course of the feast, however, the last named god appeared in their midst like a dark shadow, and when bidden to depart, he gave vent to his evil passions in a torrent of invective against the gods. Of the Aesir and the Athal that are here within, not one has a friendly word for thee. Then, jealous of the praises that Fungfang, Aesir's servant, had won for the dexterity with which he waited upon his master's guests, Loki suddenly turned upon him and slew him. And this wanton crime, the gods in fierce wrath drove Loki away once more, threatening him with dire punishment should he ever appear before them again. Scarcely had the Aesir recovered from this disagreeable interruption to their feast and resumed their places at the board when Loki came creeping in once more, resuming his slanders with venomous tongue and taunting the gods with their weaknesses or shortcomings, dwelling maliciously upon their physical imperfections and deriding them for their mistakes. In vain, the gods tried to stem his abuse. His voice rose louder and louder, and he was just giving utterance to some base slander about Sif when he was suddenly cut short by the sight of Thor's hammer, angrily brandished by an arm whose power he knew full well, and he fled incontinently. Knowing that he could now have no hope of being admitted into Asgard, and that sooner or later the gods, seeing the effects of his evil deeds, would regret having permitted him to roam the world, would try either to bind him or slay him, Loki withdrew to the mountains, where he built himself a hut with 4 doors, which he always left wide open to permit of a hasty escape. Carefully laying his plans, he decided that if the gods should come in search of him, he would rush down to the neighboring cataract. According to tradition, the Franenger force on stream, and changing himself into a salmon, would thus evade his pursuers. He reasoned, however, that although he could easily avoid any hook, it might be difficult for him to effect his escape if the gods should fashion a net like that of the sea goddess Ran. Haunted by this fear, he decided to test the possibility of making such a mesh and started to make one out of twine. He was still engaged upon the task when Odin, Vasir, and Thor suddenly appeared in the distance, and knowing that they had discovered his retreat, Loki threw his half finished net onto the fire and rushed through one of his ever open doors. He leaped into the waterfall, where, in the shape of a salmon, he hid some stones in the bed of the stream. The gods, finding the hut empty, were about to depart when Vasir perceived the remnants of the burned net on the hearth. And some thought the inspiration came to him, and he advised the gods to weave a similar implement and use it in searching for their foe in the neighboring stream, since it would be like Loki to choose such a method of baffling their pursuit. This advice seemed good and was immediately followed, and, the net finished, the gods proceeded to drag the stream. Loki eluded the net at first cast by hiding at the bottom of the river between two stones. When the gods weighted the mesh and tried a second time, he effected his escape by jumping up the stream. A third attempt to secure him proved successful, however, for as he once more tried to get away by a sudden leap, Thor caught him in midair and held him so fast that he could not escape. The salmon, whose slipperiness is proverbial in the north, is noted for its remarkably slim tail, and Norsemen attribute this to Thor's tight grasp upon his foe. Loki now sullenly resumed his wonted shape, and his captors dragged him down into a cavern, where they made him fast, using as bonds the entrails of his son, Narvi, who had been torn to pieces by Bali, his brother, whom the gods had changed into a wolf for that very purpose. One of the fetters was passed under Loki's shoulders and one under his loins, thereby securing him firmly hand to foot. The gods, not feeling quite satisfied that the strips, tough and enduring as they were, would not give way, changed them into adamantium or iron. Be on a rock's point with the entrails of the icy cold sun, the gods will bind Loki. Skadi, the giantess, a personification of the cold mountain stream who had joyfully watched the fettering of her foe, now fastened a serpent directly over Loki's head, and so that its venom would fall drop by drop upon his upturned face. But Sigyn, Loki's faithful wife, hurried with a cup to his side, and until the day of Ragnarok, remained by him, catching the drops as they fell, never leaving her post except when her vessel was full, and she was obliged to empty it. Only during her short absence could the drops of venom fall upon Loki's face, and then they caused such intense pain that he writhed with anguish, his efforts to get free shaking the earth and producing earthquakes which frightened mortals. Ere the left him in his anguish, o'er his treacherous brow ungrateful, Skadi hung a serpent, hateful, venom drops for eye distilling, every nerve with torment filling. Thus shall he in horror languish, by him still unwavering kneeling, Sigyn at his tortured side, faithful wife, with beaker stealing drops of venom as they fall, agonizing poison all. Sleepless, changeless, ever dealing comfort, will she still abide only when the cups overflowing must fresh pain and smarting cause, swift to void the breaker going. Shall she in her watching pause, then death to Loki, loudly cry shrieks of terror, groans of horror, breaking forth in thunder's peal, with his writhing scarred earth reels, trembling and quaking, from high the heaven is shaking. So wears he out his awful doom, until dread Ragnarok comes soon. In this painful position, Loki was destined to remain until the twilight of the gods, when his bonds would be loosened and he would take part in fatal conflict on the battlefield of Vigrid, falling at last by the hand of Heimdall, who would be slain at the same time. As we have seen, the venom-dropping snake in this myth is the cold mountain stream whose waters, falling from time to time upon subterranean fire, evaporate in steam, which escapes through fissures and causes earthquakes and geysers, a phenomenon with which the inhabitants of Iceland, for instance, were very familiar with. When the gods were reduced to the rank of demons by the introduction of Christianity, Loki was confounded with Saturn, who'd also been shorn of his divine attributes, and both were considered the prototypes of Satan. The last day of the week, which was held sacred to Loki, was known in the Norse as Lagerdag, or Wash Day. But in English, it was changed to Saturday, and was said to owe its name not to Saturn, but to Satyr, the thief in ambush, and the Teutonic god of agriculture, who is supposed to be merely another personification of Loki in another pantheon. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the entire thing. So next week, we can go into another one if you guys want me to keep doing that. It's up to you.
Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah.
So maybe we'll
Might
do
have a
Thor or
Due
Balder or
respect
something.
for Saturday. It's Loki's day.
It's Loki's day. I want to thank everybody who's been here now. I know why I like Saturdays. Definitely Chris Persian. Yes. All right. Well, we'll keep doing it. Thank you guys so very much for being here, for hanging out with us, for spending your time with us on this Thursday night. Thank you, Lady Miss. Thank you so very much, Lady Miss Penny. Thank you for being here, DJ Ronnie G, Pat S. You guys make you all, Chris Persia, you all make this show worth doing. So thank you so very much. And again, that big, huge thank you to my co-host. The reason why we have such great 7 Kinds of Mischief Thursday nights is Adega Outlaw. Thank you for continuing to do this.
That's what they made us. Make sure I have my parts and pieces for my automatons. If you do not get them properly, you will pay dearly. So be kind and give me my parts.
Go forth, my automaton of death. Oh my God. I love it. I love it.
Go forth, my beauty. Make the city quiet.
Make the city quiet. Guys, we'll be back tomorrow morning with the weekend review with Dave Bob and the lady Arwen Avalon. Until then, take care. Be excellent to each other. Always speak friend to enter. We'll see you guys in the next 7 Kinds of Mischief. Take care, everybody.
See ya.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.